I think the most important mimetic battlefield in the Great Meme War, which is the war of ideas going on in Western civilization, memes from a Richard Dawkins technical sense. The most important battlefield, right, the strategic, the Thermopylae of the Great Meme Wars is the debate over liberalism and whether or not it's a good ideology to base our societies on moving forward.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you do have core
It's a very
values.
frequently misunderstood debate as well.
Yes, definitely. And I have core values that could be described as liberal. I'm sure you do as well, in terms of generally open dialogue and things like that. And I'm most interested by the critiques of liberalism from the left and the right. I think the left tends to make pretty good economic critiques some of the time. Like Yanis Varoufakis has his conception of techno-feudalism that I think is compelling. And then the dissident right, of which you are a leading intellectual of.
I'm the only one who uses that label as far as I'm concerned. Everyone else uses it only negatively. Dissident right is all those other right-wingers that I'm not.
That's fair. That's fair. Well,
I'm unusual in the fact that I apply that label to myself.
Fair. I think the cultural critiques from the dissident right, or the reactionary right maybe, are sometimes have some very compelling points that need to be addressed. So maybe we can start. Can you describe your intellectual background and your philosophy and how it stands in opposition to liberalism, and then we can go through some more.
Okay, I mean, maybe I could start by clarifying this debate. A lot of centrists and the crowd, I should say the liberal promoting crowd that you see in people like, I don't want to say James Lindsay since I never talked to the guy, but the people I've talked to like Joel Berry and Local Distance, and I don't know, but people surrounding them, they oftentimes make the mistake to think that people who are post-liberal do not like liberalism or do not like liberty. This is absolutely a mistake. The criticism of liberty or liberalism is that this system that was developed really based on Enlightenment ideas had as preconceptions a number of sociologic and anthropologic circumstances that were very applicable and present in Christian civilization. However, liberalism does not produce these circumstances. In fact, it exhausts them. The faucets of liberalism, once they're employed and once they're put into practice, destroys the basis for which the liberalism relies on creating order and creating moral structures. And this really comes to a head when the question of trust and moral structures is examined, or even things that are as crude as, are you having enough children? So when I don't know exactly what variety of liberalism you follow or even what you mean by that, but typically, what I'm known for is I started doing videos as kind of from a, I don't know, sort of a conservative / Christian pushback on people like Carl Benjamin, who at the time was a very big proponent of liberalism. But as I kind of sharpened my criticism of Carl Benjamin's, or Sargon of Akkad as he was known at the time, as I sharpened my criticism of him, I found myself drawing more and more on classic critics of the Enlightenment, shall we say. And, these have contemporary forms, and these have modern forms, and these have ancient forms. But they all focus on these fundamental mistakes that the Enlightenment made and that are being carried over to our present world, and that are causing basically none of the social systems that we are working with right now to make much sense. So, I mean, liberalism, the classic example of all of this, is they're trying to save a system that's functionally incoherent by making small modifications. And this process has been going on since the 1960s, when we got radically less hypocritical about our liberalism, and we started putting into practice a lot of ideas that were only till that point theoretical and Enlightenment style thinking. And what came out of the 60s was a number of incredible economic and cultural contradictions. And what you'll see, again, when you compare modern people to their ancient counterparts, is you'll see all of human history, all humans who have preceded us will have one attitude to something like debt or sex or nationhood or boundaries or borders or war. And then everyone post 1972 will have the exact opposite opinion. So there's sort of a split between the modern way of saying things and the modern situation and the ancient, more I don't know, I would say like historically lindy. That's a phrase we use in my circles to describe things that are time tested. There's sort of a break between the modern perspectives of these things and the historical ones. And this development has created a number of huge contradictions inside modern Western societies. And the way we've resolved them is by coming up with these insane middle ground positions. And if you think of anything, people complain about boomerisms a lot or boomers a lot. Well, almost all, when people complain about boomer politics, almost always what they're talking about is one of these halfway makes no sense solutions. The problem is that a lot of these modern Enlightenment ideas are incoherent on their face. They don't work even in theory. If you just explain them and criticize them a little bit, they immediately fall apart. Or, what's actually more often the case is that they're radically inconsistent with human anthropology. If you take anything but a total blank slate view of humanity, if you incorporate any of the evidence we have from psychometric testing or from evolutionary psychology, and you don't sugarcoat it at all, immediately half of the propositions that you encounter in liberalism's modern instantiation. I'm not talking about like the 18th century one where they're all slave owners. The modern instantiation of post-1968 liberalism makes no sense in combination with these physical realities about politics and about human biology.
So
that's it.
Yeah. So what's like a specific? You said if you break it apart, if you analyze it, it's incoherent, it falls apart. What's like a specific tenet of liberalism that falls apart?
A great example. A great example of this is sexual liberty. This is the way I started my channel doing. I mean, like we could do the spicier ones if you wanted. I'm sure you don't want to talk about race too much on your channel, but the sexual revolution is the easiest one. There was this idea in very late Enlightenment thinking. I'm not going to talk about exactly who was exploring this because not all of them are very savory. This idea that there is something called sexual liberty, that people had this ability to use and express their love however they wanted to. And the natural consequence of this, when you combine it with modern systems of birth control and modern systems of essentially creating an infinite pool of people that you can meet at the click of a button, is to create a sexual free-for-all between men and women. The problem with this is that under conditions of a sexual free-for-all, a lot of bad things happen. There are an enormous number of men just can't get dates. People can't match up and marry. The marriage rate it bottoms out because women can't actually close out sort of a market transaction to get married in time. The birth rate collapses because nobody has children. And people end up altogether more miserable. You can see this quite clearly in the happiness numbers corresponding to relationships. People ask people about how happy they are and how satisfied they are in their relationships. And since the sexual revolution was supposed to have liberated us, especially women, these happiness rates have been decreasing precipitously, especially among women. This has been replicated multiple times. It even has a name in social science. It's called the paradox of female unhappiness. And you can put it into Google and see the multiple studies on that. And, no one argues over this anymore. Everyone knows that the dating market is fucked. Like it used to be in 2016, when I started my channel, I'd actually have to convince people that these problems existed between men and women. I don't have to argue that anymore. Even progressives acknowledge that the system is fucked. But the system is fucked because we let people do what they wanted. The system is fucked, but I'm sorry I'm swearing so much, because we let a huge percentage of women do OnlyFans. We unleashed pornography to colonize the brains of men. We submitted to this idiotic idea of high-speed dating, copied from the gay male community, thank you very much, which essentially basically unleashed men's polygamous instincts and women's hypergamous instincts. And under those circumstances, men and women do not marry. They just don't. And now our birth rate's collapsing and our relationships are in tatters. And everyone can see this problem. This is, I write on Substack. You could just count the number of articles in my feed. One day it's the men complaining about the women. One day it's the women complaining about the men. But they're both complaining about the same thing. And the thing is that the moral regulations are not in place for men and women to meet together and mate. And this is a direct consequence of liberal attitudes towards sexuality that come directly from the Enlightenment. And we could go even further. I mean, there's just tons of them. You know, there's ones about education too, about war, about nationhood, about debt. You know, you can just go down the list.
No. I want to get through some of those, but just to contextualize it, because the reason I'm sympathetic to this line of argumentation is one of my major intellectual influences is Jordan Peterson, pre-Daily Wire Jordan Peterson, who made a lot of, who I think laid the philosophical groundwork that you seem to be adopt, or at least mirroring in some sense.
These ideas are 200 years old that I'm talking about.
Correct.
Yes, so the sociological observation I made was made by I can't remember the sociologist's name in the 1920s. It was reiterated by a bunch of sociologists in the 1960s, and then people like Regnerus redid the studies again, and it's been replicated again and again and again and again. This has been a 150-year-old sociological result about monogamy and its role in human mating practices. It's not controversial at all.
Yes, I misspoke when I say Jordan Peterson laid. He laid the groundwork for me that I now see. You know, you adopting something.
Sure.
Or putting forward something similar. Because the idea is we have the Constitution, we have our institutions, we have our norms. And, you know, those are made explicit in whatever, our founding documents, our legal system. But there's a set of implicit norms or rules or ideas that need to be operative for the actual liberalism software to work, right?
Yes.
It's like, in order to be able to run a computer game that was made for PC, you have to run
it
on
BIOS.
a PC. Correct.
You need the BIOS, right?
Yeah, then you need the BIOS code.
We just, in the 1960s, we deleted the BIOS.
Right. So we have something new. Now this is...
No, we don't have anything new. We have nothing.
Fair. I'm curious what you think of, because this is the idea of the metaphorical substrate from the Jordan Peterson perspective, which is you have your articulated worldview or your institutional rules and laws and norms, but then it's nested in something that is extra linguistic, and there's implicit assumptions about like the morality of people and whatnot. And when he talks about the metaphorical substrate being blown out and now we're kind of unmoored or whatnot. To me, that is exactly what the dissident right is putting forward. You know, the smart dissident right people. And I don't see how people can really argue with it. Like you said, the sexual liberation one I think is obvious. Even for like the Zoomers, like all the people that would be the most progressive demographics, they see this. And so I guess I'm curious what you think of. I don't know how much you follow Jordan Peterson. Specifically in that
I kind of stopped
context.
following him after he had the breakdown.
Okay, but prior to that, do you think that his intellectual trajectory was in the right direction?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the problem here, though, you know, Paul, if I can call you that,
you can.
He's falling into the same trap. He's trying to like make some kind of fix at sort of like the operating system level for something that's much more fundamental. You cannot just, you know, one weird trick your way into fixing these religious problems. And the solutions to this have to be political in a very hard way if you're going to fix a foundational problem like this. Okay, you can't talk people into...
Sorry, go ahead.
You can't talk people into... I mean, first of all, you know, we're separating all of these things. Like, you know, there's this... I assume that this is the direction you're going, and give me some rope here. Like, you're probably going to narrow down on one problem of the sexual revolution and ask, how are we going to fix this? Like abortion or like pornography or any of these problems. But that's not these individual things. These aren't the problems. The problem is the overarching thing.
Oh, I agree.
And the sexual marketplace, that's connected to the problems with debt. And that's connected to the problems of open borders and of globalism and of aligning government. So, you know, it's not just one thing. The entire system has to be kind of done away with, and we have to forcibly remoralize society.
Interesting.
And you can't talk people into this either. I mean, like, you know, I can have a conversation with people who are rational, you know, and we can work this out, and you can see where the problem lies. But if the moral system is not backed up by a force, then the ordinary people will not actually adopt it. A great example of this is like female. I mean, I hate this, sounds like an insult talking point, but I'm sure you've heard of like the whole female hypergamy problem, right? Like, you know, when you put people in a sexual free for all, the women go for like, you know, a very small number of men. You can't talk women out of this. Like, it's impossible to do it, right? Like
Right,
you can show them, like, there's this guy called home math. Like, you can draw the little diagrams and you can bring up the numbers and you can show people doing this. Like, you can't talk people out of this. And the reason why you can't talk people out of this is because it's sort of a prisoner's dilemma, right? If you're the person who breaks from the moral system gets the advantage. So the entire system has to be repaired, either in microcosm or in macrocosm.
Okay.
Or
Nice.
or it doesn't work at all. And that's
So
the problem with drilling down in like one issue, right?
I agree. Hence, what's why I said at the beginning, I think the most important mimetic battlefield is the discussion of liberalism, because it's the underpinning, idea behind all of these other individual issues, whether it's open borders or falling population rate, lack of family formation, all that stuff. So, what does that look like? What is political what is remoralization by force? Is that what you said? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, so far in our current age, we don't really have a means to do this. The best you could probably do in our, like, if you're talking about like practically moving, the only way you can enforce moral norms is in smaller communities, and trying to obtain power and institute policies there socially. This is, obviously, people use this example. There are numerous religious communities that are minoritarian, are able to enforce interior norms and are able to overcome the problems of modernity by kind of sidestepping around it. But the other alternative, like macrocosmically fixing the problem, like on a civilizational scale, would mean that, like, a different government would have to come into effect that has diametrically opposite opinions and attitudes to our present government. And most importantly, this new government would have to totally redesign the education system and would have to rule without democratic oversight for a very long time.
Interesting. So, like a Christian nationalist autarky?
Well, I'm not a nationalist, but
Okay.
autarky is kind of, these things. I don't say autarky or a monarchy. So this is another mistake that people, every time. The fate of all old YouTubers is that you have to hear dumber versions of your own ideas or people who you've read repeated back to you in like Jubilee debates, right? So people are like, oh, we'll have a king. We'll have a king. Well, okay, like, you can't though. Right? There's, the guy, and you saw this. I know you commented on this Jubilee debate with the guy who wanted a king, right? Like, he obviously heard like somebody like me or somebody in the right wing spirit talking about monarchy and the advantages historically of monarchy, right? And so he says, oh, we should have a king. And, what was it? Who was it? Mehdi Hassan, who was interviewing him, where he's like, oh, where we get the king? And the guy's like, well, recruit him from the aristocratic class. Well, thank God, America of 2025 doesn't have an aristocratic class. It has a managerial class, right? Like, for your audience here, aristocratic classes are people who are bound to a people and to a land as lords, and who make themselves notable through war, essentially, right? They're on the line because the sword of Damocles hangs over their head, and they're trained from birth to function and to operate politically on the basis of loyalty. Like, if you Dune fans in your audience, how do the people behave in Dune or Game of Thrones, right? They talk about like meeting performance goals, or making people's utility go up, or delivering value. They talk about loyalty, they talk about virtue, they talk about these are what are called like martial values or aristocratic values. We do not have an aristocratic class, and therefore it's sort of impossible for us to develop a king without a cultural shift that's somewhere in the future, right? So one possibility is one of these subcommunities develops. I mean, we're talking, first of all, I'm going to be clear here. I'm talking historically. I'm not talking about like policy that's going to be implemented imminently. I don't think that there is any imminent policy that can be done to fix this problem. If you're thinking about like in the next election cycle, I'm talking about the macrocosmic problems, right? But what classic political realist theory teaches us, and this is why people say like, I'm a monarchist or whatever, or I'm a Christian nationalist. There are certain things you should be looking for and certain things you should not be looking for. If you're looking for political solutions that are in the short term, you should be looking for large coalitions that are coming in under the banner of one person, and that make specific promises such that one person sees you as their constituency, part of their reigning coalition, or if you're a fan of selectorate theory, their reigning selectorate, right? That's what you should be. I'm basing this on history. That's what you should be looking for change. What you should not be looking for change is how do we negotiate some political compromise so that we write down in law, like, these are the new rules. These rules will not be respected. Rules are only effective to people who share a common moral structure, which a modern America does not. That's also why the Constitution is a ridiculous document at this stage. I mean, it's this archaic piece of mythology. I mean, it had teeth for a while, but modern people don't believe in it, so it doesn't. The Constitution is only equal to the amount of belief that people put into the Constitution. And once the Constitution itself becomes a political document, it no longer is binding in a way that's meaningful on the rest of the people. Okay, people are talking about this like it's like 1880, and people actually believe that the Constitution limits government. It doesn't.
Okay, so what do you think of like the online Christian nationalist movement, the Christian nationalist ideology, like people like Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, Andrew Wilson? What do you think of these people?
I've been in a debate with Nick Fuentes once back in the day when we were debating the existence of God on a panel together.
Nice.
I am friends with friends. I've had back and forth chats with Stephen Wolfe. He's a very nice man.
I've talked to Stephen. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I don't know. Look, I'm not a nationalist. Stephen has this idea, I believe, and I think there's sort of a Catholic equivalent and somewhat more highbrow equivalent, like the Adrian Vermeule integral. I don't want to speak for Dr. Vermeule, but that's sort of he's thinking along similar lines, right? He's thinking like, we have to remoralize society, therefore we need to sort of seize control over the government. That would hypothetically be a way to remoralize the government, but I don't think that they really respect how much power would be needed to remoralize the United States of America. You need to completely destroy progressivism at the highest levels in the universities, such that it could not return. You can't have like a debate
at the universities.
At the universities, that's where it begins. That's where it has to end.
Okay, let me, because I get your point about it's not policy that can particularly fix this, so we don't want to go issue by issue per se and necessarily talk. It is not, and the specific.
It's about personnel, right? It's about people. Right. The Constitution is no longer a universal moral binding document because the underlying morals are no longer accepted. Therefore, it will be the people who actually rule us. And where do the people who come from in our world class? Harvard, Princeton, the university system, right? So if you wanted to remoralize society in any meaningful way, the solution would have to start at the higher levels of education, and they would have to completely remake it such that the morals would be completely inverted. Now, the only way to do that would be to essentially replace the entire administration of the universities and most of the staff and most of the faculty as well, which, this is the levels of power that we're talking about. But eventually it would have to be done. I think what will happen first is that the university will start kind of collapsing in on itself. I think you're already starting to see that, and that people will try to create alternatives. And then from those alternatives, then there might be a revolution, and a new class might be able to come in and seize control of the apparatus overall.
So do you think anyone who is on the right, who is engaging in political, like, let's try and win elections type stuff, you think they're just swatting at things they'll never kill?
I mean, elections do matter. I want to put that down. I mean, there have been several legitimate government revolutions in this country. One in 1860, another one you could argue one also in 1787, right? You could argue there's been a political revolution in 1787. There's been a political revolution in 1860. There was a political revolution in 1932. So these things happen through elections. I guess the 1787 one was.
Is 32 the election of FDR?
New Deal.
Okay.
Yeah. So FDR comes in on an election and basically totally takes over the government and replaces all of it. The government that
this is Curtis Yarvin's argument.
Oh, this is a there's lots of controversial things that Yarvin talks about. This is not controversial. No one will disagree that this is what happened in the 1930s. FDR adopts the government in, I believe it's 1932. By the time that his government leaves, which is really 1950, like Truman is an extension of Roosevelt in almost everything. By the time and even then, like, Eisenhower is like their favorite general, right? He's not. I know that people want to add like Stevenson or whatever, but like he is absolutely somebody that the New Deal liked. And by the time his government leaves office in 1950, there's nobody from the old order there. They're all New Dealers. Every single department is new. Every single organization operates completely differently. They operate by FDR's rules. The Constitution has been completely reinterpreted. I don't know. It's a totally different government. And
Sure.
more importantly, and you see this in the 50s and going on to the 60s, the education curriculum is completely different. And this is something that is this is a change that is hard to overstate, and it would require a similar change. And again, the problem here is when this revolution happened in the 1930s, there was a class of people who was very ready to step into this role, and there currently is not. But that's the kind of thing that we would be looking for if you wanted this kind of large change. It can happen via election, and in the meantime, elections do matter. I mean, the amount of problems that we got from the Biden administration that we're not getting from Trump is very, very large. Just the amount of heat that you get as a right winger is entirely lessened, or it's in a totally different category. So, I mean, these things do have impacts. They are not going to, but on the other hand, Trump is not going to make a new government, at least not at the rate he's going.
Okay, so there's a couple different directions that we could go down, and I want to go down. Mm-hmm. Maybe I think it's because I don't consider myself. I'm not on the dissident right. I'm not a Christian. Mm-hmm. I'm sympathetic to the dissident right. I'm sympathetic to the Christian nationalists in the same way that I'm sympathetic to the progressives.
You should be.
I think progressives have a lot to offer. I think that the conception that conservatives and progressives are two sides of the same coin, which you would agree with, right? But
modern conservatives,
modern progressives. But I mean
modern liberals and modern conservatives are part of the same apparatus of the New Deal.
Right. But my conception is that we're talking like at an evolutionary, like human level. There are conservative right-wing, quote-unquote, personalities and left-wing personality types. There are people who focus on stability and trying to keep systems stable versus people who try to transform and adapt them. You need both.
Oh, see, this is unusual because what I'm proposing here is a transformative change.
Correct. Yes. Right.
Which is why this idea that right and left correspond to status quo versus change I don't think that is true. That is what conservatism is characterized by, status quo orientation, and liberal progressivism is characterized by a desire for gradual change. Those are the two sides of the same coin. But when we talk about comparing to a right-wing movement that wants to radically transform the system versus a left-wing movement that wants to radically transform the system, we can no longer use the language of, well, I support the status quo to distinguish.
Correct.
them.
Right.
Because neither do. I do not support the status quo.
Correct. Yes. And I don't want to get bogged down by the details in terms
of. I don't mean to language police you.
No. Thank you. I appreciate
it. This has a tendency to confuse people, so that's why I'm trying to get ahead of it.
That's fair. So I guess the area that I want to explore is, to what degree do our beliefs actually align? Are we oriented toward the same goals? Mm-hmm. Because I'm Christian adjacent. I probably believe in God. It would be dishonest of me to say that I do believe in God when I don't. I have my own pathway there.
What are your goals, I should ask?
My goals are a stable, flourishing society and the maximization of well-being, a la Sam Harris.
Mm. Well, that's hard
to put it simply.
You have to define well-being.
Correct. Yeah, that's very much the problem. But maybe we can start.
Is well-being pleasure, or is it more like health and virtue?
Well, correct. Yes, positive freedom versus negative freedom. I don't believe freedom is the highest value. It's not even
positive versus negative. If you were to compare me to someone like Vosh, he believes that well-being is tightly linked to pleasure.
Correct.
And I do not.
Yes.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's hedonic. That's what well-being is.
Right.
And so when it comes to something like pornography or like AI girlfriends or any number of super drugs that come on the market. Heroin has obvious downsides to health but when it comes to like these hedonic traps that we find ourselves in, there's a lot of hedonic potential that is on the table with these technologies that I would say is not part of human thriving.
Agreed. Yes. Correct.
Okay.
So we agree on something like that.
Right-wing understanding of what well-being implies.
Potentially. Certainly. Well, so yes, it depends. I think moderate social conservatism is just called being normal, right? That's we should generally support monogamy. Like we should generally,
like I said before, like if you were to take all of human history, right, and line and come up with common human beliefs about debt, about family, about sex, about race, about nationhood, they would all be far right wing by the standards that we are discussing right now.
Correct.
And nothing I am talking about, right, like what I just laid out for you there that sounded super radical, that's a restatement of like classic political theory that you'd get from someone like Aristotle. These are not new ideas. These are just what people used to believe.
Okay, well then let me ask you these and we'll evaluate these, because obviously there can't, like, the fact that things have been around for a long period of time is a good reason to assume there's some Chesterton's fence validity to it, right?
Yeah.
But it's not a guarantee.
The Lindy property.
Lindy property. Okay.
Yes.
I like Brett Weinstein describes it as like religious traditions have had enough time for evolution to exert selection pressure on them that they would have selected out the traditions that were suboptimal or whatnot, or didn't solve problems. However, that obviously doesn't mean
without integrating a religious understanding that is a good way to view it materialistically.
Yes. So, but the flip side of that is obviously not everything that it's the genetic fallacy. Just because it's there doesn't mean it's for sure good. So I want to just kind of get your idea on some things. So, like, for example, homosexuality in the Dave Greene empire, or the Dave Greene consortium, or the Dave Greene whatever Stellaris faction.
First of all, we have to get our language straight. Homosexuality as a concept immediately needs to be eliminated. Homosexual is not identity. It is an action. It is an action.
Attraction to. Okay. All right. Well then. Okay. Fair enough. Let me.
Okay.
Let me try and phrase it in a way that avoids the.
Okay. So homosexuality is people have a proclivity for homosexuality.
Yeah. Should we criminalize people who have gay sex?
Let me put it this way. About 1 to 5% of men have a proclivity to be gay if they are exposed to the right circumstances. That's probably biological. I would guess about 80 to 90% of men have the proclivity to be polygamous if exposed to the right situation. All right.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So we've got a lot of people who have proclivities to homosexuality, a lot of men who have proclivities to adultery and polygamy. So what is the conversation around homosexuality then?
I don't know. You go on.
You brought it up. I don't want.
Oh, okay. Well,
I don't think it
should it be.
Why should I encourage? I know that I'm going to have to tell 80% of men to get fucked with their desire to essentially wed and bed multiple women. So I have no problem telling people that their sexual desires are bad and should be suppressed.
Interesting.
Now after we establish that, I'm wondering what relationship do I have to this thing we call homosexuality?
Should it be criminalized in the ideal future state?
I don't know. It depends. Depends if is that needed is the question, right? The law is there to ensure the well-being of society. If people feel they have a problem with homosexuality, then maybe it needs to be criminalized. But that has to be up to the circumstances that they see. The thing that's driving like gay identification and homosexuality right now is our education system. It has nothing to do with this legal status. Homosexuality was technically illegal no less than 20 years ago, and it was skyrocketing in our society. So legality has nothing to do with this problem right now.
Sure, but I'm asking, would you consider it a
future sci-fi scenario?
Political change can happen in relatively short periods of time, theoretically.
Sure.
So let's say 20 years from now, everything continues to move right, And now you're in the White House as one advisor, and then there's someone who says
so there's the democratic process still in place. Like
no. You've been chosen. You've been pulled from the new aristocracy, the new managerial class, or the new intellectual dark web. We'll come up with a new name that has never been used before. But you're an advisor in the White House, advising the President King or whatever it is, and there's another advisor who says we want to execute gay people. Mm-hmm. And what is? Do you think that's?
That seems like it would cause. My thing is that would cause more political fallout than it's worth, most likely.
Okay, so you'd make a practical, utilitarian argument.
Is society like already executing like rapists, and is that already happening? Like we're already executing rapists, we're already executing drug dealers, we're just executing people all the time. Is that the scenario that you're painting for me?
Well, I guess
the purpose of the question.
I
can't imagine
that's fair.
That we're we're sometimes maybe executing serial killers and sometimes not, and then we're like thinking about executing like gay people. That's ridiculous. That's like some strange, idiotic like trolley problem that will never happen.
Sure, but that's
designed to like make you say something that's like sounds ridiculously
fair. Yes. Okay. Two things. First off, what you just said, is fair, but a lot of people then would say that about anything in terms of like a Christian, state or something outside of liberalism.
Execution is a very harsh penalty. A king that just throws that out. If you're a king or a ruler or a president like FDR, who's kind of a king, and your first instinct to go after political behavior you don't like is to execute people, you're probably not a very good king.
Okay. The question, it's probably bad. Is definitely a bad question now in hindsight. I'm not trying to get you on anything. I guess sure. the question that I'm getting at is because, like, for example, if you're trying to convince,
maybe I can anticipate you. There is no such thing as a right to sexual liberty. You have no right to sexual liberty.
I mean, it's even beyond that. I'm using sexual liberty as the particular point, but even broader. The question of when does the right go too far? So, for example, we know, according to the Jordan Peterson perspective, well, the right goes too far when you make claims of ethnic superiority. Okay, fine. Ethnic difference is something else, but ethnic superiority.
What does that even mean?
Like saying, our race is better than others and we should wipe others out. Hold on. The question I'm trying to get at is.
Oh, sorry. I keep interrupting. I apologize.
Yes, no worries. I guess because what I'm trying to do is evaluate the dissident right worldview. Okay, and as a radical centrist, I'm happy to throw my lot in with whoever makes the most sense to me. Okay, so I'm evaluating the overall worldview.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And the question I have, or the issue I could foresee coming up, is the same issue that comes up with every ideology, which is they have their own extremists would take it too far. And one of the things that I evaluate the quality of an ideology is how well does it deal with its own freaks. The left is, has no ability to deal with its own freaks. If our motivation is compassion, well, then that's our only value. There's no reason to ever do anything that would hurt anyone's feelings. There's no limiting principle on it. And so I guess what I'm trying to understand with that question, maybe that's a bad question. We can pick a different topic.
Well, it's a strange question, right? Because you're thinking like this is like human rights based thinking, where like you can guarantee you can guarantee a constraint on future action, which is
no. I'm asking what are the like. As a person on the right, surely you agree that you can go too far right.
Yes, I'm not exactly sure what it would mean to go. I mean, I know actions that would be imprudent, but I don't know what it would be like. It would be, am I too far to the right? It's kind of a strange question, I guess, right?
Like you could have.
How would you measure that, right? Like,
okay, how about this? What if you're Catholic, right? You're a Christian, of course. Okay, so you agree that there are interpretations of the Bible that are too literal, right? That, like, for example, if they said,
sure.
we're not going to allow people to teach evolution in schools. Is that too far right? Or is that?
I mean,
first off, do you agree with that?
No, you definitely need to teach Darwinian theory in schools.
You do need to teach Darwinian. Yeah. Okay, so what if a Christian comes along and says, Darwin was a heretic, the Earth is 6,000 years old, Dave Greene, you're a heretic, and you're now burned at the stake. You would agree that's too far right?
Well, I mean, look, the government obviously is going to decide which one of us is going to be burned at the stake or not. I mean, more likely it's going to be you're either taught or not taught. Inside the public school system. You know, I think that I have seen a number of criticisms of Darwin from a variety of Christian sources that I think are very, very valuable, and I would teach those as well. But you absolutely need to have an understanding of evolutionary psychology to operate in this world, and that's critical.
Okay, but so you're asserting that.
But what?
Just as liberals would assert, you need to do this.
To appeal to? You're expecting
I guess my question is,
like, if you're talking, it's almost like you're asking me to nominate an arbiter above me and this person that's contesting my moral claims, and then like submit to this arbiter that I don't even really understand.
No. I'm asking you to address the problem of the fundament, and I'm using fundamentalists broadly, not like you can be fundamentalist and adherent to any ideology, not just like Christian fundamentalism. But the fundamentalists always, this is what Sam Harris said in his debate with Jordan Peterson, the fundamentalists always have the advantage because they can always cite the text more closely. So like the theory of evolution is not mentioned in the Bible. If you're making a purely religious argument, the fundamentalists can have the advantage by saying, well, Genesis says 7 days, 7 days is 7 days. That's one interpretation. And, you know, obviously because of liberalism and scientific progress, we could say in the memeified view, we're able to separate that. But my broad question is, what have you thought about the problem of how do you
want me to
stop
argue against this hypothetical young Earth creationist? Is like
no. How do you? That's one manifestation of how do you avoid getting outflanked by people who are too far to the right of you? For example, women need to wear.
There's no way you can you can say in advance that I won't get outflanked. As soon as you assert a moral principle of any variety, right, this creates an opportunity to get outflanked by Puritans. This is absolutely the case. This will never be not. So you say that for human rights, you say that for peace,
correct.
You say that for anything.
This is certainly a problem on the left, 100%. That's the problem.
You can say something like, you know, you want to have. I mean, no, I don't want to go back to this stupid Jubilee debate, but like if you had an aristocracy, this problem would be more or less solved. Because if people meet, if a certain group of elites meet behind closed doors, they can work out these problems very, very easily, even if they are fundamentalists, provided that somebody like, you know, Oliver Cromwell isn't in the room. You know, Puritan explosions will always happen. The question is the Puritan explosion going to create a bunch of trouble for you in the short term, or is it going to completely capsize your civilization?
Yeah, that's fair. Well, this is why I put.
So when we had a Puritan explosion, like this country was founded by people who were in one of these puritanical modes, right? The literal Puritans of England started a civil war against the king, killed the king, you know, ran the country into the ground for, in my opinion, for like the better part of a decade, and colonized this country. And you know that, you know, they were broadly hated for that activity. It was more or less unavoidable. But that being said, that little spaz out, you know, with killing the king and banning Christmas notwithstanding, that little explosion actually was very, very fruitful. It created a number of highly moral communities that were then able to go on and essentially found the rest of America. And a bunch of refugees that were able to colonize it in the South that were on the losing side.
Sure.
I mean, look, this is a cycle of history. It's unavoidable.
Yeah.
I can't, you know, you're saying like, how do we stop the cycle of civilizations? I don't know what to say to you about that, right? I think that the cycle of civilizations is more or less impossible. A period of debauchery will be, if you remoralize society, you will get Puritans. That is unavoidable.
Sure.
Now, if you want to say, to stop Puritans, we won't remoralize society, then your society will die.
Correct. That's right. I agree with that. I guess maybe then, okay, based on your historical analyses and your you know what you know of history, are there insights about how to stop, like what happens when Puritans go far and how to stop that?
What stops a Puritan revolution is a very firm king. You know, you think that what's the great irony about all of this is the people who are on the progressive side, with let's call them Baroque sexual preferences, right? The great irony about this is you think that I, as like this reactionary Catholic, want to hang like gay people, or maybe
I don't know. I don't think.
right?
No, I don't think you think that. That was a bad question to ask.
No,
Again, I'm trying to get at this
it's a fruitful one. It's a fruitful one because once people understand homosexuality clearly, they will have that impulse. That impulse will emerge from the new generations when we objectively look at these sexual practices and their fruits. And there will be people that will be clamoring for this. What will hold them back is an aristocratic class or a king. Or a monarch of some variety. The great irony about all of this is that the people who are the beneficiaries of liberalism will be the ones that will be demanding the king have more power. It will be the Puritans who want to have the popularis in charge. If history is any guide to how this will work.
Sure.
And so I, as somebody who was raised in a highly progressive society, I believe that a firm leader is necessary for the liberty of people, or liberty is a weird concept to talk about for atheists, but for the well-being and safety of the people who are currently progressives, a very firmly guided moral government is needed by responsible people, and not just by appeals to popular will.
And so, what does that look like? In terms of, let's say, in the next 30 years.
I can't predict the future.
It's a hypothetical, but in terms of, well, what is this? You're talking about a king and an aristocracy, so I presume you have some model of. Currently, we have the bicameral, Congress and
I
House
hate to
and Senate.
disappoint you. I have no plans to disassemble the United States government and replace it with an alternative. My main concern is to make people politically aware of the problems in our current era, and to get people to organize in groups to address them, either to build their own communities or to lobby for political power, such that when a larger change is coming, people can hop on the right side and not get caught up in fighting for dead things like the Constitution. The most important thing that we're fighting for right now is our people, the survival of the civilization, our connection to God, our faith, our families. Things like the Constitution or the Republic or democracy, these things are meaningless words that we toss around and apply to various things. Even though, we talk about democracy all the time. Like, we're not a democracy, and the founders didn't want us to be a democracy. So, people are what frustrates me about modern politics is they're fighting over these concepts that are not even real to begin with.
Sure, and again, I'm not just I don't give a shit about democracy. I give a shit about the effects that it has, and if they're good, we'll keep it, and if not, we need to reevaluate it. But I'm asking because I think I heard this earlier when I was preparing for this, listening to some of your conversations. It sounds like you're doing the Greta Thunberg thing. It's my job to demand the solution, not offer the alternative. So you're saying we need a king and we need an aristocrat, but then it's like, all right, well, what could a practical manifestation of that look like in the United States in 30 years or something like that? Or in 40 or 50 years?
Well, you mean you want me to plan a new government for you here? Like, that's
you're already doing that. You're saying a king and an aristocrat. What does that look like? And earlier you said obviously we can't have a Catholic autarch or a king.
Well,
so I'm not sure what you're.
The last time this happened, it looked like the New Deal.
Okay, so but that's not a king in the.
I'm using this. It is a very, 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 very powerful executive that totally redesigns the government. And I'm sure whatever happens in America, the person will be like, "Oh yes, I was elected by the will of the people."
Sure, yeah. And
by
the communists
some
say they have free speech.
Right?
Yeah.
Course, right. Sure. It's called the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea, right?
Right.
Okay. Whatever, right? Like, I'm sure they'll say that, right? But that it'll have to be a new government with new priorities.
Okay, because then I guess this is okay. I think this clarifies things because king is a specific term, like hereditary monarch. I mean, you can have elected kings and all that. But are when you say king, do you view FDR as effectively the kind of king you're referring to?
Well, no. Look, we can't. As I said before, we can't have a king. kings come from an aristocratic class. There is no more aristocratic class. It was destroyed.
Right.
Right. So when I say, I'm speaking euphemistically, right? I'm saying that, like, when I say we have to have a king, what I'm saying is that change cannot happen through this kind of like legislative democratic dialectic. Now, the reason why change cannot happen, and I know you probably have heard this before, the reason why change cannot happen is because the demos will always pay out for short-term spending over long-term rectification of the problem. Thus, the incentive of, so, this was a problem, and I hate to always use history examples, but that's all I have, right? This was a problem inside the Roman Republic. The empire was necessary. And again, this is not my opinion. This is what people writing at the time said, right? It was necessary because the short-term incentives of the Senate were always to drive towards further and further escalated versions of civil war. And if that had continued, it would have driven the entire empire into the ground. And the same thing is true for all oligarchic systems. They develop perverse incentives and they need to be disrupted. So we cannot have a king. Like, that's impossible because there's no aristocratic class. You can have some group of people or some singular person that has a large amount of executive power that comes in and rectifies the situation, like FDR, which is exactly what FDR was. And I think that is much more likely. Now, we don't really have a clear angle about where this kind of force would come from. But what's important in my mind is to create a large group of organized people that understand the dynamics of the problems that we're facing in the 21st century and that are willing to get behind leadership that are moving in that direction and to be organized, more organized than their opponents. The progressives, the problem right now is, like, we're completely talking past each other. The people who are fighting for these progressive ideas, these progressive social visions, are fighting for a world that cannot exist and will never exist and doesn't even exist in concept. It could not even be produced in a microcosm. And so, the political action that's needed is further organization so that, the transition that will come will be smoother. Or alternatively, a worst case scenario, to build the transition in microcosm so that in the event of a larger system failure, the smaller pieces will be able to pick up the pieces. That's worst case scenario, though, because that is a very, very, people talk about this all the time, like that meme. When the society collapses, my ideology will dominate. Yeah, but that's a nightmare scenario.
Correct.
It's a nightmare scenario, right? But that's why I imagine some kind of like FDR style transition of government, which is, effectively, he was a monarchical president. That's, he wasn't a monarch, but he had he had this quality about him.
Okay, so this is interesting because if I am to rob the dissident right of all of their good ideas, which is my goal, I would like to rob, or at least borrow. They're memes are copyable.
The only thing I don't want you to do is develop in this conversation.
Yeah.
I would love you to rob my ideas and to implement them, and to rob me of whatever power you think I get from saying them. The only thing I don't want are false boomer half solutions. Things that sound like, Ronald Reagan. Like the whole thing, like, we're going to cut government by spending on debt as opposed to taxes, like idiotic ideas like that. Or we're going to have equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. It's the boomer half measures that I'm really afraid of, not the actual implementation of the ideas if they're fully understood. So I have nothing but to gain from this interaction.
Well, right. My point is robbing you of the good ideas you have while leaving behind perhaps the ones I don't necessarily agree with. It seems like, okay, then FDR is a figure worth investigating further, because FDR to the progressives is held up as a hero, right? And so I guess let's say you're talking to an audience of progressives or open-minded left-wing people who like FDR and think your worldview of monarchy is insane. What are some things people should know specifically about FDR that would drive home the point that this guy was basically a monarch? Because when I think of FDR, I know the New Deal.
You
and
have
he's
to
the
be more
president.
specific who I'm talking to. Am I talking to like a communist, or I'm talking to like?
No, you're talking to a reasonable, your average intellectually engaged person in America who knows who FDR is, knows who the New Deal was, what the New Deal was, but that's about it. They're not aware of the degree to which.
I mean, FDR totally disregarded the Constitution in his remaking of America,
Like in
and
what's
he had
like how
questionable sense.
specifically?
I mean, like the Constitution clearly delineates what the government can and can't do, and says that the government has no right to do it otherwise. Almost all of the programs that he instituted broke from that pattern.
Like Social
And the
Security.
Supreme Court was among a number of other things as well, like half the programs, right? And the Supreme Court was smacking him down for this earlier. And then what he did is he threatened and said, if you don't give me exactly what I want, I'm going to just replace you with a new Supreme Court by packing the court. And then they decided to give him exactly what he wanted. They called that the decision in time that saved 9. You can say, FDR's changes were arguably necessary. They were also in many ways misguided. They created a lot of the misperceptions. They encouraged a lot of the bad Enlightenment ideas that we're currently suffering the consequences of in the modern world. And obviously half his State Department was Stalinists, but we won't get into that, right? But there were a lot of problems with it, right? But one of the things that none of those programs or the things that progressives love about FDR would be accomplished if he had followed the procedure of the office as it was laid out for him. He only accomplished it by essentially roughshotting over the procedures that other presidents before him had to follow, and by finding a workaround for those things.
Interesting. So what was it? The decision in time to save 9?
Save 9. Yeah, you can look it up.
What can you elaborate more? What is it specifically?
Okay, so early on in I'm going to butcher the history, but
Sure. But the general idea, yeah.
So FDR's policies, his New Deal policies, and it might have been before, he called it the New Deal, I forget, but his expansions of government power through his desire to remake the United States from the ground up violated numerous statutes of the Constitution, which limited federal power. Okay, you don't believe me? Go to the 10th Amendment, right? It clearly delineates. It says the government is only allowed to do the things that are in this document, or you need an amendment to do it. Think of all of the things that FDR did, from the Tennessee Valley Authority to him creating a bunch of departments to anything, right? Social Security, all this stuff. All of this stuff, even the internment of the Japanese, you can throw that in there if you want as well, right? All of these things are well outside the purviews of the federal government, and he just did them. And the Supreme Court originally was opposing his movements in this direction, and his reaction was, we're going to just pack the court. And then the court said, okay, well, we'll try to find some kind of middle ground solution so that we can allow the FDR to go forward with this while still saving face and saying that there's some limitations on what the government can and cannot do.
Interesting. Yes. I remember in Curtis Yarvin's interview with the New York Times, he said, read the last couple paragraphs of FDR's acceptance speech or something like that. And he said, it's basically what Trump said in his tweet about no man who saves his country can violate the law. So I'll have to look into FDR further, because if that's what you mean.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's called the switch in time that saved 9. That's
the switch in time.
The switch in time that saved 9.
Got it.
So, yeah. So I used the wrong. That's what the Wikipedia article is caused.
Got it.
So that's this is. These procedures were all violated. I think that left-wing thought, progressive thought, is trapped by this understanding of human rights as something that exists in the abstract when it does not. It is a construction of, it is a function of a Christian worldview, but it is not they talk about things in they're literal physical rights out there, right? This, you saw this with the Dean Withers thing, right? They're talking about a hypothetical, that Dean Withers where he doxes that dad for talking
I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. He's like, that's a human, what you said is a human rights violation. What you said is a human rights violation. I'm calling
what you said is a human rights violation.
Right. So what you said in this hypothetical situation that doesn't even apply, because it was applying to a non-existent child is a human rights violation, so I'm going to report you to the CPS. Like they talk about these abstractions of government like they are, like they're kind of like etched into the fabric of reality.
Yes, I agree. It's. I always make the point. It's funny that atheists will say the Constitution is sacred when you don't even believe the Bible is sacred.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's unless you have some sort of religious view of it, it is purely a moral utilitarian calculus, and you shouldn't hold anything like on a pedestal in a sacred way like that.
Well, which is impossible, right? Because in order to even talk about morals, you have to elevate something to be
correct. This is
sacred.
why the presuppositionalists never go away. Is because they actually have a point. You cannot actually say something is good or bad by some moral standard unless you have a moral standard by which you're measuring it.
But now, I mean, this. The problem here is, when we talk about what do we progressives, I mean, the problem with modern progressivism is that their ideas are completely incoherent. I mean, I don't even know what to say at this stage about progressives. I would like to educate them and incorporate some of their objections that I find reasonable about economics into
yeah, right.
I
was going to say, like Yanis Varoufakis, I said at the beginning, like techno-feudalism is his conception of how our modern economy has morphed into an actual like feudal system with.
I think that's a reality,
capital.
right? Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, most of my sympathies on the left are on the economic side.
Okay, well, I share them then to a certain extent. I mean,
there you go. Dave Greene, confirmed radical centrist.
You might be aware that I have a YouTube channel called The Distributist.
Yes.
Which was a anti-capitalist form of Christian social organization from the early 20th century. I have no idea why people think that I'm some kind of Ayn Rand freed marketer. I guess I might have been in my junior year of high school, but
Yes, I was a Milton Friedman fan.
Yeah, exactly, right. Like there hasn't been a Dave Greene like that for 2 decades at least.
That's fair. Well, then let me.
But the bigger problem is the cultural one. That like the cultural war issues are more important than the economic ones. This is a misunderstanding that a lot of people have. The determination of what is good and what is bad and what is moral and what is licit, what is illicit and what is licit, that is the more important battle overall. Because once that is determined, then everything else will fall from that in terms of how we plan our economy out.
Sure, and I agree in part because, I mean, politics is downstream from culture, so the economic changes don't happen until the cultural changes have been made. I don't want to focus in on because I could just have, we could have a debate about, you're Catholic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I am curious specifically when it comes to free speech and blasphemy laws, because one thing that Stephen Wolfe pushed for when I asked him is he's in favor of blasphemy laws.
Sure.
Now, I'm in favor of banning pornography. I think I'm in favor of banning pornography.
Right? Isn't it roughly the same argument, right?
Yeah, but until it depends on how you define blasphemy. Because is it blasphemy to say that evolution should be taught in schools? What if someone defines blasphemy that way?
I mean, this is unfortunately, this is a problem that we've had to deal with for a long time. It's that there are certain things that we need our ruling class and our intellectual class to say and be able to deal with that we can't just push out to the public. And so there needs to be a concept of privacy or public and private distinction. And asserting that in the age of the internet is going to be very, very difficult. But that's eventually going to have to happen in one way, shape, or form.
What do you mean public? Sorry, I didn't understand the public-private distinction in terms of what in terms of law should apply.
In terms of in terms of where all moral regulations are when it comes to speech, right? Like, so if I when it comes to blasphemy laws, which again, like this is for a hypothetical society, right? Like there's so many things you'd have to do before you got. It's like talking about executing people for homosexuality, right? Like you'd have to get through so much more. You'd have to be hanging so many people to even consider that in a realistic, non-insane sense, right? So we're talking about some kind of like hypothetical Christian society that banned open blasphemy on television. You would still need to have debates with atheists inside your university system in some way, shape, or form. This is something that has always been entertained for the last 600 years of Christian history. I believe, there were societies that had and this is kind of funny, right? Like, you're a liberal, right? Do you like John Locke?
First of all, I'm not a liberal. I don't call myself.
Oh, you're not a liberal.
No. Radical. That's. Well, I got to pick a better meme because it's lame to repeat over and over again. But no, I'm definitely not a liberal. I'm a radical of some kind.
Well, see, John Locke proposed that public atheism be illegal, but he would have absolutely, I mean, if I understood him correctly, he would support the idea of like private atheism inside an intellectual conversation to be a very illicit and needed thing to have in a society.
Interesting.
And there needs to be a debate in private. So there's lots of things that need to be kind of entertained and discussed. How spicy do you want me to get with this?
You can get as spicy as you want.
Okay,
as long as it's YouTube friendly.
It is pretty obvious. It's been pretty obvious for a very, very long time that different groups of people demographically have different levels of ability when it comes to how they think, and a lot of this has to do with genetics. This absolutely needs to be incorporated into our understanding of how to rule multiracial societies. We can't just, blast out this idea of racial hierarchy on the public web. I don't know. It will lead to the worst kind of like conflict between groups.
Interesting. Did you watch my whole video, the one I posted about nobody loves the far right more than I do? I saw you commented. Did you watch the whole one?
I don't know if I watched all of it. Okay. I got the gist though.
Yeah, right? You got the first half. That's fine. The second half, I bring up the race and IQ point, okay. and I think my position is actually no. The race and IQ debate it happens between Dick Fuentes and Destiny and all these big black YouTubers. Okay. It's like maybe our tolerance for ideas is a lot higher.
What
are
you gonna do? I mean, like the only way. So okay, fine. Actually, I'm kind of cool with that. We might just have to. This might have to become public knowledge because of the place we are in with the internet. This might just have to be something that everybody understands, and I'm cool. I'm fine with that too. This will totally be the end of civil rights, though. You are aware of that, correct? Like this is the end of civil rights as we know it. This is over.
Civil rights in terms of like affirmative action.
Well, affirmative action is part of civil rights.
Sure.
Is there one unified body of laws that came out that started with essentially the Civil Rights Act and the removal of voluntary segregation, and then it migrated to affirmative action because the plan always was to integrate all races together. When this stuff gets out, like all of those kind of motivating logic is going to go completely out the window.
Well, I don't know about. I guess it depends on what you mean by like integration or whatnot. Like we can, okay, let's say everyone became aware of the race and IQ.
I'm talking about, so people aren't necessarily aware of this, but civil rights effectively ended voluntary segregation. Like that's what it did. Like people, sure. we do this like switcheroo where we, if you're learning about this in school, one day you're talking about like government segregation, and the next day you're talking about like the Civil Rights Act, and like you skip 10 years, right? But the civil rights legislation that started with the '64 Civil Rights Act and was completed with affirmative action. This is one continuous set of laws. They are part of the same body of laws. This essentially a legalized voluntary segregation. This is essentially a legalized freedom of association as it has been classically understood. There is this YouTuber that I was on a few podcasts with 4 years ago. Avril, yeah. Right? He is learning this the hard way. Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe he'll be able to it's the Trump administration, right? The feds have calmed down about this, right? But he is pursuing something that has been thought to have been throughout all of American history to be a classic American right to create your own intentional community. This is a right that our founding fathers would have considered core, that if you did not have this right, you do not have liberty. A huge percentage of our society believes this should be illegal, and it's not even clear if it is legal in light
according
of
to
the civil rights laws.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't actually think it's that I mean, I was actually discussing this over the weekend with someone who's not white. And he was like, I think it's cringy and weird, but it shouldn't be illegal, which is the opinion I have. I think there's, I watched some interviews with them. I won't go into the vibes they put out, but the broader question is the legal question.
He's a little on our role's a little on the spectrum.
A little autistic. Yeah, that's fair.
He's a great guy.
I think a lot of them
he said, I haven't really been following his stuff recently, but way back in the day, I thought he was a very nice guy and a very intelligent guy, but he's a little on the spectrum there, right?
Yeah, that's fair. But like as far as freedom of association goes, it's like I'm in favor of like women only gyms. I'm in favor of black fraternities being able to be black fraternities. And
Those are all technical violations of the civil rights.
Right. And if someone wants to have a white only members group, I don't, it's like, okay, well, that's your right.
Okay, Paul, but we did have those things, and they were all illegalized by the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah, and I'm saying that that's probably
all right.
It's probably bad.
You're sounding like a far right winger already.
Listen, Paul, I'm very radical. I get accused of it all the time, so it's wonderful.
I mean, but if we're going down pornography bad, the sexual revolution bad, we need freedom of association. We need to have. I mean, what's going to emerge from this also, and what's emerging right now in Europe, is there's going to be a renewed understanding of collective identity along group lines, lines of race and religion. This is something that Lee Kuan Yew understood governing Singapore. He said, when you live in a multiracial society, the most important thing for you is your race and your religion. And so this all this Christian nationalism, I hate the word white nationalism, but these various forms of like British nationalism or English nationalism, these are all going to come back. And if we want to have people build communities effectively, like, we're going to have to kind of be okay with that.
Sure. I mean, we already tolerate just open communism and open left-wing, excesses. So it's like, it's entirely possible that the far right excesses have to return to balance it out for everyone to see, okay, wait a minute. There's probably something a bit more reasonable here.
Where do you, like, it feels like you have this like understanding of like where this thing settles. It's not going to balance back on the 1960s or the 1990s. Like, there's not going to be a balancing act to get back to the 1990s.
Well, when I speak of balance, I speak of balance as in a society that is properly grounded in its traditions without being overly ossified to the point where it can't adapt to the environment. So
where do you see that type of society historically speaking?
Well, I would say, it's sort of like it's like talking about evolutionary fitness. It's like every organism that exists is technically fit enough for its environment up to that point. But every organism could die tomorrow and it doesn't have fitness. I'm putting it forward as a matter of definition.
Sure.
You have, in order for a society to, assuming we want to have a good society, whatever that means. Like, well-being is poorly broadly defined, but we all have, we can.
I think we know what we mean by well-being. We mean that people have they're in their bodies healthy. They're in their collective community. The communities are healthy. There's high trust. There's high social cohesion. There's a high family formation rate and a high birth rate, and men and women don't hate each other. These are all things that we used to have before 1960 or 1968.
Right. There is not arbitrary religious oppression that goes too far, banning evolution in schools or... Mm-hmm. Right.
You're always going to have a little bit of that.
Okay. Well, you're always going to have a little bit of the other, a little bit.
I don't know. I don't think you can. I think that there's a fundamental asymmetry of this. There's a fundamental asymmetry between left and right. You can toy. You can have like, oh, we went crazy for 10 years and banned evolution, or we went crazy for we had a puritanical period for 7 years and then we got over it. That's essentially what happened to England under Oliver Cromwell. They had a little bit of a religious go crazy moment, and then I don't think it was even a decade. 7 years later, they got over it. That can happen.
Sure, but getting over it implies it was good.
Okay, but what you can't have happen, like, if an enormous number of your young people go into a situation of sexual free-for-all, like we are doing right now, where like enormous number of them are doing OnlyFans, and half your male population is addicted to pornography, and the birth rate drops to like 1.3, like, you don't get over that for like another 100 years. Like, that is not something that can just snap back, right? So the problem is that there's a fundamental asymmetry when it comes to left and right, and that is a mistake in a right-wing direction is actually very easy to undo. A mistake in a left-wing direction is very, very hard to undo, and this is because you said, well, the difference between left and right. I'm like, I should have asked you, what's your difference between left and right wing? Well, it has to do with like the force of entropy. The right wing, insofar as there is a right wing, like, we're speaking in very broad terms. The right is essentially a force of order And the left wing is a force of entropy. It's a force of dissolving the bonds inside of a society. So for instance, like let's take something that's not so hot button, like money printing. Like a tight money policy is right wing. A loose run the money printers go burr is an inherently left wing policy, right? That is like the most fundamental way to see it. It is way easier to go from, oh, we're not printing enough money, to printing enough money.
Correct.
To, oh, we're printing too much money, to then not printing enough money.
This is why the Leviathan leans left.
Exactly, right? So you know, when you say like, you know, you say a healthy society, you know, a healthy society, if a healthy society is on a kind of left-wing slope, that's accelerating, then that society is not going to be healthy for very much longer. If they have periodic puritanical uprisings, that's more or less the cost of doing business. You know, what can you do about it, right? That's how I see it. Because if you occasionally you're not going to print enough bills, you know, to match your expanding economy. But if you get to the place where we are now, where our entire economy is based on printing money and then paying interest on the money we've already printed, I have no idea how you get out of the situation. And to say something like in the 1890s, we didn't print enough money, which was probably true in the 1890s, right? We were way too heavy on gold. In the 1890s, we didn't print enough money, and we had all of these like financial panics. And then in like 2035, we printed too much money, and like these are equal and opposite. Like these are not equal, right? It's gonna take the America it took the America of 1895 like 10 years to solve their not print enough money problem, and it's going to take America of 2025 and the better part of the next century to fix this. We got ourselves into an astronomical amount of debt.
Sure. I understand what you're saying, and I think that's correct. I think the caveat would be anytime you go too far right or too far left for that matter, you also run the risk of mass death and destruction, which is not something that is easily overcome, right or left. But that plagues both the left and the right.
Yeah, any large, this is the danger. Any large scale change will come with the risk of a large war, which is very, very scary. Considering that, you know, the modern order is fundamentally unstable.
Okay, let me this last section I want to talk to you about is getting your advice on who I should pay attention to on the right. Okay?
Interesting.
So I want to hear your opinions on the following people and whether or not they are net positive or generally positive or probably a net negative, so on and so forth. Okay, Candace Owens. I
have never watched her. Is she part of the Daily Wire?
She used to be. Okay. She had a very
there was a falling out. Yeah,
I'm surprised you're not aware of that.
I heard she had a falling out based on the Israel thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, something like that. Okay, was it more Kanye like? Okay, I'll assume it's
it was a moderate version of Kanye, let's say. Which
I don't know.
Not saying much.
All of these conservative pundits just come off to me as kind of throwing red meat to a base. And, you know, look, I mean, I really don't want to comment on the whole JQ thing if I possibly can help it. But there is a subset of, and I do think that there is a lot of malign influence when it comes from Israel and other groups into this country.
Yeah.
A lot of people are benefiting from the fact that that essentially they've been able to kill off the Christian world order and any sense of collective identity that Europeans have had, and I think that's very, very malign, and we should oppose it. But you know, something tells me that Candace Owens is probably just throwing a lot of red meat to her audience and is indulging them in a lot of ways. Like, I haven't watched her, but that's probably what she's doing, right?
That's fair. Well, if you haven't watched her, it's harder to form the opinion. How about Tucker Carlson?
I generally have liked what Tucker Carlson has produced. Now, you know, I can't think of anything that I haven't liked about. I mean, I'm generally liked most of everything I've seen from him.
Daryl Cooper.
when the person's like one of my mutuals. So Daryl Cooper and I had a huge fallout over religion a few years ago.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because he's what's called a Marcionist, I believe.
He's also is he Catholic?
No, he's a Marcionist.
Oh, I didn't know if that was a branch of Catholicism. I don't know. I don't know what that is.
No. He had maybe he's repented of this, but at least 2 years ago, right? At least 2 years ago, he was promoting this very, very old heresy that the God of the Old Testament was not the real God, but in fact some kind of like demiurge or whatever, right? This is a very, very, very old heresy. This is from, this was a very popular opinion, like back in the early days when they were writing the Nicene Creed in the early centuries of Christianity. So I had a big a religious fight with him. I really like his writing. The problem is that oftentimes Daryl will chase a bunch of half-baked theories, and he's so, I admire him because he's got such an eager desire to learn, but sometimes he repeats ideas that he hasn't properly questioned them yet. Like a great example was like his theological opinions. He's spewing out like all of like these gotchas for Orthodox Christians. I mean, small Orthodox Christians. I mean, like the mainstay of like Protestant Orthodox Catholicism, like Nicene Creed Christians, right? He's spewing out all of like these gotchas, but he didn't realize that these had answers that are like 1,500 years old, right? So he does that a lot, but like it comes from a sincere place, right? And it comes from a place of curiosity. So I genuinely respect that. But people oftentimes will do is like, oh, do you like Daryl Cooper? It's like, oh yeah, I really like what he's done. Like, well, do you know he believes X, Y, and Z? And like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. But like he believes, or at least he said at one point that God was like a demiurge, right? Or something like so. I take some whatever he says on Twitter, I take with a very large grain of salt.
On that point in particular, Stephen Wolfe is Protestant. Mm-hmm. You have, you're Catholic. Nick Fuentes is Catholic. Someone like Andrew Wilson is Greek Orthodox. How relevant are the sectarian divisions in preventing or an obstacle in advancing Christian morality?
You've tempted me into my own heresy right now. I'm going to declare a heresy of the Catholic faith. They are irrelevant. The Reformation is over. The Reformation is over. It will not survive the next few centuries. It is over. This is something. I mean, the divisions between Nicene Creed Christians and the people who are outside of that, like Marcionists, that I don't want to say that Martyr Made is one. All I know is it was floating these arguments like 2 years ago, right? So like a lot of Martyr Maids, like a lot of Daryl Cooper stuff, like he sincerely entertains ideas that he has not properly criticized, and because of that, oftentimes he says things that are wrong. Like, I'm not endorsing things that he might have been inaccurate about, right? But I recognize a sincere soul when I see one, and he is a sincere soul, and I recognize an intelligent mind when I see one, and he has an intelligent mind, and that is enough to earn my deep respect, right? Okay, but the divisions inside the Nicene Creed Christianity are going to go away. They are no longer relevant in this age. And until Christians start actually building Christian states, which I think we're a ways away from, as unfortunate as as that might sound, I think that these divisions will become less and less relevant. I recognize that a lot of people who I am allied with are Protestants. This is a Protestant country. This is a WASP country. The rest of us are visiting. I recognize that I am not of the primary ethnic group that is in charge of America, and I obviously pray that they will have the proper theological view. But it's not my job to like steal away the nation from the primary ethnic group who is kind enough to invite me in. That to me is a very using political power in that way is a very I want to say it's a very unchristian way to do things.
That's fair. This is the point. Do you know Andrew Wilson?
Oh yeah, I do love it. I mean, I think I agree with most of what Andrew Wilson says, but he's probably will be watching this. But I really dislike the style. It's like, let's have a Vosh, but like for us, like. and I don't want to even insinuate that Andrew Wilson is as immoral as Vosh, but I just don't like this debate bro thing. I think that I can sit down with somebody and well, maybe I am a little bit too forceful in this conversation, but I feel that like I can have a conversation with somebody and kind of hold my ground but make my points. And I feel like this whole thing that Destiny introduced, where you seize frame and you never let it go, and that's what it is. Like, you understand that that's like the Andrew Wilson's thing,
of course,
is that like he is a master of the frame game.
It's hyper autistic.
Yeah, well, yeah,
you stick to the frame and you don't consider any context outside the frame.
Because the key to winning any debate is holding frame. That is, it's so easy. An LLM could do it, and probably already is doing it right now. It's essentially form. And look, Andrew Wilson knows his facts. He knows his debate points. He's very good at his art. I do not believe that his art is what we really need right now, even though I probably agree with him on everything else. I think that we need a more sincere and a more poetic explanation of where we are politically. And frankly, I mean, all I want for Christmas is the total apostasy of the left to become more in line with what humans have always believed about politics.
That's fair. The first conversation I have with people is always the most amicable, since I'm bringing you on and getting you on. I'll have to.
You can feel free. I love debates. You can feel free to push back on me, right?
Sure. Well, the purpose of this is to understand where you're coming from, and then better identify things. I'll have to go back and listen, and then in the future we can speak, or I can perhaps bring you in dialogue with some
sure.
people.
I love. I always wonder how I would fare against like a dyed-in-the-wool leftist. It would be. I mean, I guess I haven't debated a leftist in the longest time. It's always been like these liberals, right? These people from the Free Press or the Daily Wire type people. The left has kind of stepped out of the whole discourse space.
Would you want to debate Destiny?
Oh, okay. I might draw a line there. Look, I know what I'm going to get though. Like Destiny is like, how I said how Daryl Cooper has a sincere mind, or a sincere heart and a curious mind. Mm-hmm. Destiny does not have a sincere heart. And like, that is the most important thing I look for in anyone that I have a conversation with, is like, what are their core values? What are their core beliefs? This is a war. Like, one of my catchphrases is like way clumsier than anything Orrin McIntyre would say, is this is a war of belief. I want to know what like you value in your heart of hearts, and like what you're, and I want people to kind of bring that to the table, even if they are wrong a lot. And like Daryl Cooper, right? It is the curious mind of the sincere heart. I feel like Destiny has turned the examination of politics into a game. And I know that Andrew Wilson has a sincere heart and a curious mind. I just don't think that comes through in his content, and I wish it would more.
That's fair. Andrew and I started our YouTube channels at the same time, and we were on a little 50 view debate panels together.
He's been incredibly successful.
Yeah. I don't do clip farming, so I won't.
Okay.
I won't make you comment further on Andrew Wilson's morality. Yeah. I'm happy to tell Andrew Wilson when I think he's a fucking dumbass to his face, and vice versa. He can do the same to me.
You were asking me people.
Yes, Nicholas J. Fuentes.
Okay, I'll say this about Nick Fuentes. I stopped watching Nick Fuentes for one simple reason. I can't tell when the guy's joking. I hate this. I hate this about content creators. I hate it when they do this thing. So again, in 2018, I was on a Worski panel about the existence of God with Nick Fuentes. And then since then, I've had a number of arguments with Nick on a variety of topics. Every single one of our disagreements has been like, oh, he's joking. This is a hyperbole. It's not my job to go through this person's work and figure out what is the exaggeration and what is the sincere belief. As far as I'm concerned, Nick Fuentes gets the most shit over like the JQ stuff, I imagine, right? The problem is that at this point, half of the internet is on the JQ thing constantly, and half of it's coming from the left. So I don't even know, like, is he just like, is he getting criticized for being an early adopter or being like mean about it? I don't know what to say, right? Mm-hmm. he's certainly a good debater. Can you ask me a more specific opinion about this?
I just want your general perception.
Okay.
To your point about the irony thing, it's good that
that's my criticism of Nick Fuentes. I will come up with another criticism of Nick Fuentes after I figure out what is sincere. And Nick Fuentes is 100%. He and his fans are totally irony poisoned. They've got to get like this is what I hope that's constructive criticism for Andrew Wilson. Like I want to see more. I want to see less frame games and more sincerity. I want to see less irony poisoning from these Graeber types because I can't tell what they actually believe.
David, is so good that you did not watch any of my videos, any more than that, because I do that 100%, not 100% of the time, 80% of the time.
Yeah,
the number one criticism of me is that I'm irony poisoned.
You do that to diffuse tension.
Well, I think irony has a lot of first off, irony poisoning, absolutely real. 100%. But irony as a tool has a lot of usefulness to it in terms of, for example, if someone's going to call me a fucking dumb moron, of course I'm a dumb moron. I live my life by being a dumb moron. Like what? Because it's just a practical defense mechanism of like, what am I going to honestly consider the point you just made?
And it's brilliant in dialectic form. Like nothing works better than irony to diffuse situations. The problem is like, that your world kind of begins where your irony ends, and that is what I'm trying to kind of feel out. And like, what is this person's understanding of the good? Like, when does it start becoming unironic, right?
I think we live in the age of the evil Joker, who just laughs at everything, right? It's like literally the Dark Knight Joker, like just wants chaos and laughs at it. There's no moral
if you believe in the cyclical form of history, that is the symbol of the decline of civilization, right? The fool that brings the end. You're
true,
but Foundation series.
No,
Isaac Asimov's Foundation.
No, I know.
You never heard of Isaac Asimov. You heard of it? Okay, there's a Isaac Asimov's Foundation is the shitlib version of reactionary conservative cyclical history, and he has and I won't spoil this twist for you, but he has a literal fool play like the pivotal role in the final curtain call for the galactic civilization in this very, very famous science fiction twist that I will not ruin other than just kind of alluding to it.
Fair. Yes, Carl Jung would also say the fool is the precursor to the savior. So there's different interpretations to it.
Yep.
But to that point, irony poisoning. Irony is it's like a cursed sword. It's going to give you a lot of powerful stats, but it's going to drain your health while you wield it. And so
the internet's like that too.
Well, exactly. So the irony is, in some sense, it's a way to be able to operate in these spaces without it, infringing upon your actual psyche too much. But then the opposite problem is, then you just become a disembodied voice, and nobody cares. And like you said, your world begins where the irony ends. I'm glad we had this conversation. This is a good first step.
Okay.
I'm going to investigate. First more FDR, because it's interesting to me that you regard FDR as the kind of person who is needed, or at least that kind of thing. And FDR is like the most celebrated president on a lot of progressives' perspectives. So that's an interesting convergence there that I think should be fleshed out.
That's not original to me. That is, a lot of people have said that, and the most popular person that's repeated that has been Curtis Yarvin.
Is Yarvin? Yeah, right.
This is a popular sentiment. Before FDR, it was Lincoln who remade the American government. Sure, obviously.
Sure. Yeah. And then the next time we talk, we'll have to go. Yeah, we'll have to perhaps go a bit more debate mode on far.
Fair enough.
On where how you combat the religious extremists.
But hold on. At this age, like in this age, like we're not talking about when people are in government. Like at this age, I want to encourage religious extremism, right? Like that's the only thing that gets us.
Well, maybe. All right, this will be preview the debate.
We're kind of getting into this, but like this is I want to press this, like the only people who are having children in this world, right? Like not in the future, right now, as we speak, in 2025, there are a certain number of babies being born as we speak. They almost all almost all of them come from people that you would term religious extremists. And almost none of them come from atheists.
Maybe.
Or moderates.
I'd have to check on that. I mean, someone who
look
goes
at
to
where the babies are coming from.
A religious extremist is someone who, for example, would do child abuse. Like, for example, send a child that's gay to electric shock therapy, which I regard as the same level of abuse as giving kids like hormone blockers and stuff.
I think that if you were to look at child abuse, by and large, the biggest vector of child abuse is
the U.S. education system.
What?
The U.S. education system.
No, that's institutional. You're probably right there. But you fastened on, you got the instantiation of the most general vector. The largest vector of child abuse is non-genetically related custodians. I'm talking teachers, stepfathers, stepmothers, that kind of thing. The second one after that would be like sexual perversions inside the family that are brought on by the parents' experiences. I think that genuinely religiously motivated sexual abuse is way down on the list. I mean, maybe if it's coming through the education.
No, I don't
system,
mean.
right?
No, I don't mean sexual. Well, I don't mean sexual abuse of that. I don't know if you'd call this sexual abuse if you consider sexual identity, but I mean I believe being gay is. I think actually, here's my right wing take, or I guess left wing take compared to you probably. Being gay is like diabetes. There's type 1 and type 2. Type 1 you're born with, type 2 is environmental. And the type 1 diabetes, the type 1 gay, the natural one, I think there's a lot of Christians who would regard that as it needs to be beaten out of you and a proclivity that needs to be silenced and all that. And it's like, I don't think we should view that any differently from.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, you would have to, I mean, everybody has proclivities for certain sexual activities. And it is now pretty damn obvious to everybody that if we indulge all of these sexual proclivities, society is going to go straight to the shitter.
Correct, but you can't overcorrect to become too puritanical.
Why, of all of the things that I would care about, why would I care that we?
I'm not necessarily saying that you should care.
I mean, I guess I'm just, I think the big stumbling block is like we think like a person is gay. Like a person isn't gay. A person has an inclination to do those kind of things. But we wouldn't say that a person is like polygamous. That's why he cheated on his wife, because that's who he is. That's his truth,
Well, that is what a lot of leftists would say. Polyamory is like a identity or whatever.
Yeah, although, I guess. But then how many? I'm not getting. I don't want to go into the debate right now. But
we'll
see where this
preview
logic
it.
goes, right?
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Do you want to plug yourself here at the end?
Well, I'm Dave Greene. I blog on a YouTube channel called The Distributist, which been around since 2015, 16. And I blog at a Substack called Letters from Fiddler's Green. And I produce content mostly about politics, some art stuff, and also with a large focus. We didn't talk about this, but a large focus of my political work is getting people to work in community. This has been a major project of people who are ideologically affiliated with me, and I consider it to be the large work of this era of politics. But that's obviously a story for another time. But that's who I am, and that's where you can find me.